Hello, hello, this is Alex Burkett, and you're listening to the Long Game Podcast. In this episode, I'm chatting with Olga Denisova. Olga has been doing B2B marketing for 15 years, 10 of them leading marketing teams in hypergrowth companies such as SEMrush and Veeam. Of course, I asked her if SEO is really dead this time. But I also asked some non-absurd questions too, stuff around the paradoxical nature of hypergrowth, seeing the backscene of two companies that were in that hypergrowth stage, and how often new problems can pop up even with additional headcount and budget. We talked about how to maintain a sense of scrappiness and focus, and we also talked about the unsexy but important truth that foundational marketing activities, boring marketing activities often, drive results, especially when you identify high impact points to optimize and really dig into the details. To that point, we talked about mass scale personalization efforts that Olga drove at SEMrush that led to a huge increase in attributable revenue. And oh yes, we talked about attribution and why it is actually important to measure what you manage. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Olga Denisova. In our podcast form, we do an intake form that we send you. We ask not for non-business topics that you might want to cover. And many people say things like work-life balance or maybe their favorite sport. But on your form, you said medicine and classical music, which is highly intriguing. How do you remember writing that? Or what did you mean medicine and classical music? Tell me about how that plays a role in your life.
Oh my God. So first, I totally forgot what I have submitted there. So it comes like a complete sheer surprise to me now hearing this back, but I understand the logic. So it's very likely that I decoded the question in the form of, okay, so what are your key interests are? Mm-hmm. And so I'm very keen on medicine, especially like everything that can kill us. So I'm very keen on reading about, okay, what virus can kill us, what are the deadly diseases are out there. So I wanted to be a surgeon. So probably this is how it explains it. And classical music, yeah, I'm a big fan of classical music. And so ask me about my favorite opera or something.
Do you listen to classical music while you work, or do you reserve it for something that's more focused and for pleasure? Are you experiencing the music, or is it background when you're working?
No, it's not the background. It's more about, feeling like living the whole experience. Part of that is that I used to play piano a lot. And I studied piano for 9 years, I think. So I was fairly sophisticated. And I think my love for music stems from this experience, right? So for me, I would always, whenever I go to a new city, I would always search for, okay, so what they have on the agenda in the local opera house, or is there any famous musician coming there? So for me, it's all about, whole experience and acoustics and, living it.
What do most people misunderstand about classical music? I feel like maybe I might be wrong here, but It's not what most people would say is their favorite type of music. I think a lot of people would relegate it to something that they listen to at the background of a cocktail party or when they're reading or something like that. But you experience it. So what are most people missing?
Oh, okay. I think everyone expects a very fast, climax. And okay, so because the usual length of any modern song is 3 minutes. Mm-hmm. And you have it all there. So, there is the introduction, then there is, certain building up for the climax, and then there is some repetitive, a couple of repetitive lines, and that's it. And then there is, the emotional closure. So it's done. And with classical music, you need to be ready for something longer and stronger. So yeah, it will be way more diverse, I would say. So, and there will be, so many, ups and downs. And for me, that's the best part of it, because it's very often unexpected, especially if we talk about more modern composers. Like Shostakovich, for example. So it's always you're very often find yourself utterly surprised, like, oh, I didn't see it coming. And then all of a sudden, there is this big orchestra play or something. So this is what I love about it. And this is probably what people misunderstand, like the complexity, and that you shouldn't be ready for something quick. It's not a quickie.
I have a whole lot of thoughts on that. I'll ask you one more question on music, and then I swear we can talk about business.
Yeah.
But I started college as a music major, so I'm also a classical music fan. So I understand this world. Piano, that was always a challenge for me. I didn't grow up playing it, so maybe you have to learn it as a kid in order to really, get it. I played guitar and drums, and as part of my college music major, I had to learn piano, and it was very challenging for me. So I'm wondering, what is the most challenging part of playing piano? Like, I feel like there's the finger, the dexterity, the actual movement, the physicality. There's the music theory. Like, what, in your words, what's the most challenging portion?
Yeah, I truly enjoyed theory and composition and everything, that comes to it. But the hardest part has always been discipline. Not in terms of that it's hard to be disciplined, but you don't realize how many hours you need to spend on dull exercises, like repeating the same thing over and over again, before you can actually, play anything and improvise and get any close to proper sound. I'm not talking about, a really beautiful sound, but just properly sounding music. I mean, this is such a long path. I think that's why a lot of people, drop it, because when it comes to other instruments, this exercise part is not that much required to actually start playing something meaningful. So I'll take the guitar as an example. I know that, again, to be a beautifully sophisticated player, you'll need, again, also to spend a lot of time, but you can already, learn certain, 3 tunes or something, and you can already be, the heart of any party, because, hey, you can play something. With piano, it's not really like this, because, again, to do any proper sound, you need to spend so many dull hours that everyone's like, screw it, I'll go for guitar.
I learned I could play Blink-182 songs within 1 week of playing guitar, and I feel like I've just plateaued, and I've ridden that wave ever since. I haven't gotten much beyond that, so I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I think I hate to be the person to extrapolate lessons from random things, but when you were talking about the foundations, and the way I read into that is there's a lot of like kind of boring things you have to do over and over again. And my founders and I have talked about this on our kitchen side episodes. I'm doing jujitsu now, and you go in and you do the same. You want to like practice the same little escapes over and over again.
Yeah.
But everybody wants to learn the fancy submissions or whatever. And I'm seeing a lot of that in the marketing world lately. And one thing that I've admired about SEMrush from the outside, at least, is it seems like SEMrush has done the foundations very well. Like there's just a very strong executional component to doing paid advertising. I believe that you also revamped the affiliate program. I think I read that on your LinkedIn. A very strong SEO presence, of course. But none of these things to me are like flashy, like HBR article. Like it's not like the new thing. It's like you've just done the foundational things very well. Does that resonate?
Oh, you can't imagine how much. And I'll be honest, yeah. So I find myself quite often in the position of, okay, I need to pitch something, and I realize that it's not that fancy and flashy to some of the things that are being presented during the conferences, right? So, but like you said, the fundamentals of marketing, they're usually not that sexy, as they say. So, and they're made of, again, multiple repetitive exercising. Like, for example, let's take paid advertising. So it's not that you come up with a fancy new strategy and you conquer the paid search. No, it's 200, 300 very small tests in a row for several months, even longer, and you tune every single smaller detail. And that's the reason why you were able to support, the sustainable growth, as they say it right now. Because you may not be, the one to show this, all of a sudden success, because especially in the saturated markets and in the saturated channels, it's no longer the case of, okay, I found a growth hack and now I'm going to be a success there. It's the question of being very focused, sometimes boringly focused on one particular type of activity and polishing it to the perfection. So, and I'm very glad that you actually noticed, the progress that we've done together, with the whole SEMrush marketing team, again, honing in on every tiny aspect of what we have been doing there. But at the end of the day, it's the success in the long term.
I do, because I've seen the background on some of the initiatives that other companies are doing that are more flashy and headline worthy, I guess. And I also see the results of that compared to more of the quote unquote boring efforts. And it's a hard, it's a reconciliation for me, because what I'm seeing get talked about is not what I'm seeing reflected in the things that are driving results. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Okay, so you've held leadership positions at both Veeam and SEMrush. So maybe just you want to do a little background on your positions there. You were at both companies for a while.
Yes. No, and both were one of the most eventful, I would say, and rich experiences in my career, and definitely the most global and scalable. So I joined Veeam after quite a few years in startups, and at that point I was like, okay, I really want to learn how the enterprise organization functions. And at that point, Veeam was mid-market, I think. Yeah. So they were about 1,000 employees when I joined. So I spent there 5 years. In 5 years, Veeam had grown at that time to 5,000 employees. So 5 times growth. And I think revenue number, after 5 years, we hit the 1 billion revenue mark. So Veeam became the unicorn, basically. And I think the main thing that I learned there is the teething pains, as they call them, of a rapidly growing organization. So what are the most common mistakes? And when I joined SEMrush, I could kind of experience and practice everything that I learned in Veeam, but with more impact over, the processes, because I joined as a VP of digital marketing, a higher position and bigger impact. And at that point, I also got a chance to fix some of these pains that I learned about.
What was SEMrush when you joined, and what was the growth there? That was also a very fast growing company during your tenure.
Yes, absolutely. So when I joined SEMrush, I think the revenue number was 120 million per year. And this year, SEMrush is heading towards 300 million revenue. So growth is also extremely high and amazing, honestly.
So at Veeam, it was 5x employee growth, SEMrush 2 to 3x revenue growth. That's a very interesting phase to go through. Yeah. There's some quote out there. It's all happy families are happy in the same way, and all unhappy families are unhappy in a different way. I can't remember the quote, but I'm wondering what the similarities were between the two companies. I know they're vastly different industries, and the growth trajectories were different, but what was in common? What were the principles that you could use in both places that applied?
Yeah. So first, I think the main growth of any rapidly growing organization is the growing number of team members, because people tend to underestimate the complexity of communications and complexity of what it takes to build proper processes and actually make several team members a team. Because when it happens, imagine you join a team and it's the team of 3 people. In a year, it's the team of 13 people. And even though like everyone has like their job responsibilities, they're very much the same. And so the question is, okay, so what does everyone from the team do? What are they responsible for? How do you make sure they don't overlap and not do the same thing? How do you make sure that they actually communicate properly and make the best of their personality qualities and their hard knowledge? And I think that's one of the most difficult parts, really. So when you onboard every new single team member, they understand their place in the overall organization. You assign them a certain responsibility area, because nothing can be more demotivating is when you join a team and you have no idea, okay, but what am I actually accountable for? So I have a fancy title. I joined, the best team in the world and the best brand, but how can I drive a change in the current organization? Because it's very closely connected to motivation, right? You want to understand what you can impact so that you're actually motivated to bring results. And so when you don't have proper time, to onboard everyone properly and show their potential value to the team, you end up with extensive team number, but actually the same 3 people contributing and the rest trying to figure out what they need to do and what they're accountable for. So that's absolutely number one reason for potential cause of potential failure in any growing organization.
As a leader, that must be an interesting conflict of sorts, like especially during the past couple of years when companies raised at very high valuations, there were insane growth expectations, right? Like you've got a couple levers available to you. It's kind of the budget behind the campaigns and then the headcount. Like those are the main 2 levers you can pull to grow faster. So on one hand, you're incentivized to grow your team as quickly as possible, because the more people working on the problem, theoretically, the faster you can grow. But I have to imagine, I mean, I've maybe experienced this at one point or another, but you come to a company and you join that role and you're like, actually, there's nothing set up for this. Like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. So I would imagine like, it would be very difficult to concretely say like, this is the KPI, this is the target you own for every single position while scaling that fast. Does that make sense? That was kind of convoluted, but no.
No, it does make sense. And I experienced that as well. So again, I joined so many startups and nothing is defined there. So basically you're like, in a kitten thrown in the cold water and you're like, okay, mommy, how do I swim? So, but this was one of my, I would say, key principles. I really want to make sure that everyone on my team has crystal clear understanding of what their KPIs are and what are they responsible for. So, for example, that I remember very clearly the first days when I joined SEMrush and I started my one-on-ones with every single team member on like 40 plus people department. And this is when I also realized quickly, so how many teams are actually doing the same thing without realizing that. And again, my next immediate thing was to take the general objective of like certain sales number, the number of purchases, and break it down like, okay, this is what is expected from team leaders. This is what is expected from every single channel, then sub channel, then team member. And of course, like you said, some positions cannot be that easily quantified, but this is when processes come into play. And for certain positions, the KPI can be, the time to market, the time to execution, so that you ensure that there is also, this smooth transition in tasks between like teams. So my key point here is whenever you think that, okay, this area is impossible, to be very clear in, objectives because I'm a copywriter or I don't know, I'm a creative person. There is always more clarity that can be provided in the number of tasks, in the time that it takes to perform these tasks. And the more time you spend on this at the very beginning, which is very time consuming, the more, payback you'll get along the journey.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you took the job seriously of a leader to say, like, all right, here's our earnings targets. I'm working backwards from those and I'm building a growth model. So at least you have clarity. And I think, maybe at the beginning, and this is parlaying into my next question, but maybe in the beginning stages, you can get just a talented high agency person and say, like, hey, figure out how to grow. How do you grow stuff, right? It can be very generic. But as you're scaling, it does make sense to have more of a specified function and to spend just a little bit of time thinking, like, in a best case scenario, we hire this person. What are they going to do for the business, right? So that prep work, I feel like, is important there. The next question then is, do you believe that there's like certain people are a fit for certain stages of companies? Like, let's say somebody joins SEMrush or whatever company, employee count 500 or 50. Do you believe that there's a natural phasing out after a certain growth, like where they're just like, all right, this is no longer the environment I thrive in? Or do you think you can take that same employee and really make the experience, can you transition the experience with them so they still fit in at 5,000 employees?
Oh my God, I love this question. Honestly, I think that, obviously, if you're, very focused and aimed for, gaining experience across the board in startups and enterprises, you can play it everywhere, play your role. But at the end of the day, there is still, certain harmony, talking about music, that can be produced when you find the right person for their right place. And I do believe that, there is certain, personality characteristics which are better for startup environments. And this is, can-do attitude, like go-get achievers who are very fast to execute, fast to, break things and then fix them. When it comes to bigger organizations, it's more about, building everything properly, paying attention to every single detail, more process-oriented sometimes just because of the massiveness of the organization. So, I would agree that, certain personalities belong to certain stages. There is a but, though, and this but comes from my belief that you always need to put yourself out of your comfort zone, as they say it. Just not for the sake of, I'm growing, but for the sake of challenging your own habits. And because imagine that you have been working in startups for your whole life. You're missing hell of a knowledge when it comes to building, again, proper processes or scaling in the right way. So for me, it's essential to, again, enrich your experience every once in a while, going to somewhere that you don't belong to in the first place, just to understand, this is what I'm missing and this is what I can learn about.
You really do learn about what you don't want as well in some of those situations. Like, I know, I guess I can say, like, HubSpot, when I joined HubSpot, I was very much hired in a role that was very scrappy. I came from only startups. So it was very much like figure stuff out. Right. And there was a certain time, like I was the main talent I had was sort of a creative, innovative, like, let's think about things 0 to 1. Let's poke the box. Let's kind of mess with the standard operations. And then, toward when the company scaled, I don't think that was disincentivized. There was a lot of employees like me who had that skill set. But I did feel like I was not able to do the things that I was best at a certain scale. Well, I still learned a lot of valuable lessons, especially for running the agency, how to communicate with executives, how to get buy-in, like all of the soft skills that actually are more important now that I'm running the business. But there was a certain stage where I was like, the zone of genius that I have is not as valuable at this stage now. So I should go somewhere else where it is valuable.
Yeah, no, you can't imagine how much it resonates with me, and I kind of experienced the same when I was growing again together with Veeam. So again, I joined it like 1,000 employees in 5 years, 5,000 employees, and at some point I kind of had the same feeling that okay, probably it's no longer the best place I can be in, and also bring the best value I can, because at that point it was again massive organization, and for me personally it was like okay, I remember this feeling that my impact, my personal impact, and the impact of my team as are relatively small in relation to overall organization, not in terms of like budget or revenue, but in terms of like general operational model. At that point Veeam was so massive, it was like again an enterprise company basically, and there have been like 100 plus teams, and I understood that okay, this machine is going to function no matter what, just because again it has already been built. And the question is, okay, so how do you make, these details, not squeaking, but not necessarily building the details. And for me, I'm more about, okay, I really want to join something where I can build things sometimes from the ground up. So I can, hear like what you're talking about, like very well.
So your last two roles, you were at Veeam and SEMrush. I can't remember the specific times, but like 5-6 years at each company, right?
Yeah. So overall it was like close to 9 years, in both companies.
So it's interesting. I think most people know at this point the advantages of job hopping strategically. You can join maybe an earlier stage company, get a bigger title. You can join a later stage one, come in at like a higher level. Like there's sort of a strategy career growth wise to doing so. But I'm curious, and you touched on this a little bit with like learning the different skills required at different stages. But what are the underrated benefits of actually staying at the same company for, I don't know, the average tenure now? It's probably like a year or 2 years in tech.
Yeah.
Yours is a longer average tenure. So what are the advantages of doing that?
Yeah. So first, I think the most essential factor here is there anything for you to learn? Because if you have been, in any company for like 5 years in the same position, doing the same thing, I would have so many questions about you and like your personal motivation and basically, why would you spend so much time doing the same thing? For me, like across all these years, I had a chance to grow. Like, here we talk about like vertical growth. So my impact, the scale of things that I was doing in a new role every time was bigger and bigger. And so for me, the key lessons here were, okay, so how do I manage 5 people, then 10 people, then 20 people? So, and it's, okay, how do I manage managers of people? So that's the first like leadership challenge for me. And I have been learning so much again across all these 9 years. The second part was literally about hard skills. So for me in Veeam, it was all about content strategy and campaign framework and go-to-market. And since it was a global organization, it is a global organization, and my role was global, I had a chance to dive deeper into every time new region. So, okay, so this half year, I'm going to focus more on APJ, and I'm working with field marketers there. So in other words, like both on Veeam and in SEMrush, my role evolved together with the number of years that I spent in every company, and that was the key to me. And why you should stay in my opinion in one company, when you should stay. So first, when you get an opportunity to grow, both in the it may be the growth as a manager, so the number of subordinates, the number of teams reporting into you, if you have a chance to switch between different functions. Because one of the things that I think helped me very much in my career progress was the fact that I literally have hands-on experience with every single function in marketing. So I worked with paid advertising, like literally in advertising platforms. I did copywriting, I did market research. And so switching all these, job functions, even without switching, the department and the company, for me, it's like the greatest opportunity ever. So I get to learn a lot of things. I get to bring value, and I'm paid for it. So what can be wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. I like the framing of like the learning rate, right? Because you were at two fast growing companies and you had your foot in like fields that you knew about, so you could easily leverage that to put your other foot in fields that you don't know about. So your learning rate stayed pretty high the whole time. I could imagine if you're at a flat company, like you're not doing much innovative new things, like you build an SEO content roadmap once a quarter and you do a little bit of internal link auditing, like, and you're doing that for years on end. You got to start to say, all right, what do I want to be doing? Like, am I still learning things, or am I just checking the box? Right. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just want to add that like anyone who has been doing the same job for like several years and still feeling good about it, like obviously there is no shame about it. So because again, there are like different types of people, and everyone again aspires for different types of things, right? So if you keep inspired, if you are inspired by doing again SEO for a number of years and still enjoying it that much in the same position in the same company, okay, good for you. But yeah, my personal opinion, no, I'll be dead.
I'm with you. Is SEO finally dead this time?
Oh no. Okay, no, please. So I keep hearing the same thing over and over again. So how many times did we announce SEO dead? Like, oh my God. No, I think what's happening is it is transforming, and it is okay, it is expected. And for me, the most curious thing is why everyone is so keen specifically on SEO to call it dead whenever there is any update and whenever there is brand new technology. Because hey, advertising, the way it evolved in the past like 13 years, it's totally different. But no one talks about, like, everyone is talking about like higher CPC, but still like we're all doing it. So no one claims that, hey, advertising is dead. But SEO, everyone is so keen. I don't know why. Probably because it's quite challenging and it's scary to invest into some channel where you can see any return over, the span of several months. So probably that's the reason. And you as a marketing leader, it's easier for you to say, no, it's dead. But hey, it's just transforming. There is a new, again, factor to count in.
I'm going to give you a hot take and let me know what you think about this. This is something I noticed a couple weeks ago. Okay. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I shouldn't. It's a lot of sensational stuff on there.
Yeah.
So, something I noticed when I was scrolling through posts is like, and this is because I run an SEO agency, of course, but like most of the takes were from SEOs, and like they were sensational. Like one person's like, hey, links don't matter. Hey, SEO is dead. Like you just see all of this. And then there's like all kinds of like, grandiose, look at me, like here's a cool chart that goes up and to the right. And I just noticed, I'm like, I never see paid acquisition people doing that. I'm sure they do it too, and I just don't follow them as much. But like, I never really see people talking in grandiose terms about paid acquisition. And I wonder if it's because the quantifiable nature of paid ads. Like if you're a paid ads manager, you can see I'm putting $10 in, I'm getting $12 out. This is the equation. And therefore you don't need to write about it and think about it and be a thought leader about it.
Yeah.
It seems like we have a lot of thought leaders in SEO comparatively.
Oh, that's a good take. Yeah, probably so. Because again, one thing that I already noticed is that, again, no one claims that paid advertising is dead, but SEO every once in a while. So yeah, probably the reason is, again, longer longer time to actually understand the value, harder to quantify. Obviously, the question of attribution is here, right? Because when we talk about SEO, very often it's low intent users, right? So it's like the wider upper part of the funnel. Thus, it's harder actually to prove your value to the business and to prove that, hey, invest X amount of dollars and see ROI in a year at best if Google doesn't release any update. So yeah, that's why probably everyone fancies, these charts with sporadic growth in the right upper corner.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm curious, and you don't have to make any baseless predictions, or I'm not asking you to be like a sensational thought leader right now. But coming from SEMrush, my understanding is also that SEMrush has increased investment in organic growth and SEO, but I may be wrong about that. What is your take on the future of SEO? Like, how do you see things evolving?
Yeah. So, well, first, I'll tell you this. You will need to continue investing in SEO just because we just talked about like paid advertising. And I remember I read this very interesting fact from State of SEO study. And it said that less than 1% of all searches go to paid advertising. So in other words, 99% of people, they never click on your paid ads, they go to the organic results. And again, regardless of the way that you're going to index on Google and whether AI is going to impact, what we see in the Google feed or any other search engine feed, the point is people are reluctant to engage with paid materials because there is certain prejudice. So you'll need to keep investing in SEO and potentially increase its investments, your investments in SEO also because the competition is harder. Because, okay, let's take 5 years ago. If you would talk to any small business owner, they potentially never heard about SEO. They were like, doing their business. 5 years later, if you talk now to any SMB owner, they will be very well versed in SEO and advertising and the rest of marketing. Because I see this tendency of everyone is a marketer right now, right? So that's where high competition comes from. So before it was the game of enterprise and mid-market companies. Now everyone's in the game. So secondly, yeah, there will be a higher competition. But again, like this is what can keep you motivated to provide better content, to provide more diverse content. Because also when we talk about SEO, it's no longer the text. And this is, I think, factor number 3 to keep in mind. We used to think about SEO is, okay, this is an article, so like meta headline and keywords and such. Lately, again, all the studies show that people do not longer search through, the links, text links only, but they also check videos, they check images, they check maps. So it means that you will also you'll need to be more diverse in your SEO game. So this is my take on where SEO is heading.
I love that you mentioned the different content types because in the past, let's say SEOs were solving a problem with a relatively known solution. And now there's a little bit more chaos injected into the formula. There's different content types, perspectives. Reddit and Quora seem to be ranking a lot higher now. And of course, we have SGE and artificial intelligence answers. And a lot of people will throw up their hands and say, I don't know what to do. So they just do nothing. But I feel like now in times of change, that's when the biggest inflection point comes and the most value can accrete to the person who figures it out. So for me, that's like the time to roll up your sleeves and say, how do we get included in those AI snippets? How do we get included? How do we expand beyond text SEO into video? How do we incorporate that into our existing strategy? I feel like there's a lot more competitive alpha to be had right now than ever before. At least that's my optimistic take.
Yes. No. Yes to your optimistic take. I'm with you.
I'd like to ask you about attribution. This is kind of a quick pivot here, so forgive me there. But one thing that we had talked about on our pre-conversation, our pre-interview chat was you built an advanced attribution model at SEMrush, which I think is particularly interesting, not just because I'm a mathy, nerdy data guy, but there's also a lot of takes now in the industry around attribution. I think also to throw up your hands and say, oh, like attribution isn't perfect. It doesn't measure X, Y, and Z. Therefore, forget about it. Let's not measure anything. Let's do self-reported attribution. Maybe that works at startups and like when you're only investing in one or two channels, but SEMrush is investing in multiple channels at very high scale budgets. So can you walk me through your philosophy on attribution and what you did at SEMrush there?
Yeah, of course. So first, I'll give you that. So now attribution model is perfect. It's a given. We need to live with that, but it does not mean that you cannot be close to perfection, so to speak. And that was, my attitude both in Veeam and SEMrush. Okay, so how do we? Okay, it's not perfect, but still, how can we get cleaner data? Which is more insightful for us, because basically your attribution dictates what you're going to invest next. So the first principle here for me, and this is like the guiding principle, you always need to use the multi-touch attribution. And when we talk about multi-touch attribution, so obviously the main question is, okay, so where do I start? Because it's not that the conversation is new. We have been talking about it for like, I don't know, at least 7-8 years now in the industry. And for me, it's like, just go and do it. So the first immediate take is make sure that you take into account every single touch, and you give more weight to the touches which are closer to the conversion, meaning like the purchase, and closer to the very first touch. So first touch also gains more weight. Why? Because it's net new lead for us, right? Then the question comes, okay, so how do I define the weight between click and view through conversion? And this is where testing comes into play and conversion lift studies. So what you do, you run a test, having certain certain frequency for, let's say, display banners. And then you measure, okay, so what happens with this frequency to conversion, with this and that. And this is how you define, okay, so it feels like the weight of, every view is this. So that's the second step, how you can gauge your attribution model. And last but not least, cross-device tests and all these dark social contribution tests. When you basically launch some initiative in let's say certain geography, and then you don't do the same thing in another geography, let's say, and then you measure the consequences in both. And this is how you can partly define the value of hard to measure activities. And these are everything related to brand, like community, again, dark social, mobile, initiatives, because when it comes to mobile advertising, so one of the main issues that we had in my experience was, okay, to understand, we were able to convert this customer on a certain device, but what happens then on the desktop? So can it be that, okay, they've seen certain ads on the desktop and then we got, a direct mobile visit, let's say. So I think, long story short, make sure to start multi-touch attribution model. That's one thing. And the second thing, what is going to be your KPI like for your attribution? So what are you going to split between these touches? So, and for me, it's always like revenue driven model. So you can split the weight of conversions to lead. You can split the weight of the conversion into, let's say, registration or a trial. And these are all going to be quite illustrative. But the main point is, okay, to build the revenue-driven attribution model so that you see how much revenue each channel brings. And this will probably will help thought leaders in SEO also to understand what actual value they bring to the company.
I like that point on picking the right KPI. Something else that you mentioned made me think of this tweet that I recently saw. So it was your point on dark social and essentially things that are hard to track or you can't track. Yeah. And this was Kevin Hillstrom, I believe, tweeted this. He's an analyst, speaks to analysts. And his point was, if you've built a model where you can track 100% accuracy, congratulations, you're a bad marketer because you have no word of mouth, right? Like his point was, if there's stuff you can't track, that's a really good sign that your business is doing well because you have word of mouth and things that you can't track. So it was sort of an interesting take that I'm like, yeah, actually, that's what I've seen in every business that I've been a part of is like, fantastic. Like, oh, I can't track that. That's good. That means people are talking about my business, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't track the other 80% of things that I can track.
Exactly. Absolutely. And, well, I'll tell you this. So again, as a marketer, you just have to live with that, okay, like 15% of what I'm driving, I have no way to 100% measure. But again, at the same point, when it comes to word of mouth evaluation, there is always certain correlation, let's say, between direct traffic, between branded traffic. So how many queries, how many branded search queries happened the last month and the month before that. So even in as intangible activity as word of mouth, there are certain ways to somehow see its impact, not necessarily, again, specifically quantified, okay, this is like 2%, but still see, certain trend lines. And this is also something that we have been doing in connection to paid advertising impact as well. So we invested that much in, let's say, display and video advertising. So did our brand search volume change or not? And we have seen that, okay, it changed. So it means that, again, consciously or subconsciously, we did impact, this brand awareness and brand recognition. So again, there are always ways to somehow understand whether you're on the right track or not. So yeah, even with word of mouth.
I like that. Yeah, it's not perfect. It's not an A/B test where you can parse out exact causality of like a single change, but you can see if this investment goes up, does this corollary, like does the pool of things that I can't track, like maybe impressions on LinkedIn, and it has some correlation with like self-reported, found you on social media, and like you can see that there's like a difference there time-wise. Personalization. It's necessary to do attribution for personalization. You're welcome on that transition. So tell me about the personalization system that you built at SEMrush. It sounds quite advanced.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So, when it comes to well-established businesses like SEMrush or Veeam, or again, any business which is above like 100 million revenue per year, it's very likely that the majority of promotional activities are already there and they are fairly advanced. Otherwise, they wouldn't have grown to this level, right? And so the question is, okay, so how do you advance them? And personalization is like the number one answer. And devil is in detail when it comes to personalization, right? So the question here is, first, what can you personalize? And here we talk about the intent and how you customize your content to the intent of the user. So I'll illustrate that. So let's say you're searching for something in Google and you have entered a specific term, let's say keyword tool. And then you see an ad that says, hey, #1 keyword tool here, check this out. So the ad contains the exact search term. So you click on the ad, you land on the landing page, you see again the same headline, the best keyword tool you ever imagined. Okay, so it's again consistent with the search query you were using. Okay, you register on this landing page, you're brought to the sign up page, and then guess what? Keyword tool. So you see the headline. Okay, so you're about to register for, again, the best keyword tool ever. So you sign up, you end up on the keyword tool, and then next day you receive a message that says, okay, welcome to the keyword tool. Let us give you some, guidance how to use it. So the whole journey is 100% customized to the very first search query you entered. And that's the key, basically, about personalization. User has to see that you provide them what they need, right? And so you customize it according to their search queries. You customize it according to their background, like job title or a vertical they're working on. And this personalization should be everywhere. It won't work if you, let's say, personalize one email chain, and then you're like, hey, but we personalized it. We added your name. Why aren't you grateful? No, it's not. Personalization is not about adding a name. It's about, again, serving the user's interests. And yeah, adding their name is very nice. But at the end of the day is, okay, you need to build email marketing, for example, again, around persona profile. Your ad should be consistent with the search queries. Your landing pages should have dynamic headlines. And the best part of it is that even though it's quite long and hard to execute and involves a lot of teams across the board, the best part of it is that it pays off in a real dollar amount. And for us in SEMrush, it was 40% revenue growth. New user revenue growth. And for me, like 40% growth in revenue in a well-established organization from a certain effort, that's quite an achievement. And I'm not even talking about, CDR increase or like conversion rate increase, dollar amount revenue. That increased, it proves that personalization is working. I'll give you another example from Amazon. I just read it. So I think... So remember when you search anything on Amazon, you see the feed, which is personalized to your interests, what to buy. So it brings close to 30% of overall revenue in Amazon. So again, they don't pay that much attention to, demographic and again, greeting you with your name. It's more about feeding you what may interest you. And it pays off. So almost 30%. I was stunned, I'll be honest.
You're using more of behavioral or behavioral intent signals as opposed to even firmographic, right? A lot of people will install some sort of a Clearbit or another data enrichment tool and say, oh, this is a person coming from a company with 5,000 plus employees. We're going to change the logos on the page, which I feel like is also a little bit first name personalization. It's like, okay, that's nice, but also it's not the major needle mover. So on this, maybe this is getting into the weeds, but so dynamic search ads, you can customize like the text based on what they search for in Google Ads. And then the landing page itself, you're not creating hundreds of different URLs. You're creating one URL and then personalizing the copy. So it's like you're personalizing the page itself, not the URL, right? Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all about dynamic content. So because, well, when it comes to personalization, you also should be very conscious about the amount of time and efforts you put into this, right? Because again, we're talking about very minor, subtle changes. So you have to be efficient. So there are so many customer journeys and there are so many customer scenarios. So there is no way you can build a brand new landing page for every new query or like a brand new email chain. So it's always any part of it should be dynamic and should be automated.
Yeah, we did some of that at when I was at Workato working on experimentation. The thing we didn't do though, and the more impressive part to me is the product tie-in, where like you've got the ad, the landing page, but then somebody clicks on the CTA and signs up. You personalize the onboarding flow, which to me is very impressive. And I'm guessing because it's not a unique URL, you did that with some sort of an intent key applied to the CTA on the page, given the maybe the UTM content or one of the parameters that come through on that. That's probably very technical to get into, but that part is impressive to me.
Yeah, it is impressive. It is truly impressive. But I'll also give you this tiny detail, which is very important. So when it comes to personalization, one of my other conclusions, and I would say, again, very surprising ones, was that certain personalization doesn't help you. So when it comes to most types of tasks, like jobs to be done, as they say, on the customer side, which are most frequent, personalization helps. So the example that I shared with you was about keyword tool, which is a very frequent task to accomplish for a customer. But another learning that we had is when we tried personalization for every single minor thing that can happen there, like very it's hard for me to come up with an example, but again, very specific, like search query, like very minor task. And we were trying to, again, serve them the content. Okay, I'll give you an example. SEMrush is mostly known as an SEO tool, first and foremost, and then like the rest. And so when we try to personalize it with all the other, small, bells and whistles that we have within the tool, which are not SEO related, it sometimes didn't work for us. And this is when we stopped personalization, because even though people were searching for, content planning template, when they saw SEMrush, they were expecting also to see something closely related to SEMrush, you see? So my point here is that personalization is also something that you need to test, and there is like no single recipe. And so I won't tell you that, okay, you need to personalize every single parameter, but instead drive tests and see, okay, so what are the elements that make sense to personalize? So that will be my probably slightly controversial to what I have shared before.
No, I get what you're saying. I'll put it into slightly obnoxious terms too, because that's the way my brain thinks. But economics wise, like if you think about personalization, even if it's done in a low marginal cost way, like you're doing with, say, Google Optimize or Intellimize, and it's just text changes, there's still a cost associated with each additional targeting arm you have, whether it's like the data you're collecting or the management of those experiences, right? You can't just unlimited, have a million different pages and not expect to have some cost associated with that. And then with each page, there's sort of an expected upside. So you can calculate maybe an expected value of each given experience. Exactly. And there is a point of diminishing marginal utility to more experiences, right? Where the cost of that new arm doesn't warrant like the upside that it might bring because that's so small. So it's almost like maybe not 80-20, but like a smaller portion of personalized experiences are going to bring a massive amount of the upside, as opposed to just literally personalizing everything.
Exactly that. Thank you.
It's a really nerdy way to put it.
Oh no, I love it.
I could talk to you about personalization for days, but I'm wondering if you'd want to switch up a couple more personal productivity kind of questions that I wanted to ask. Yeah,
go for it.
All right. So you're posting on LinkedIn. You're doing a podcast with me right now. Okay. You mentioned that you said you're putting yourself out there for kind of you're new to putting yourself out there, right?
Yes.
So what drove you to start posting, talking, going public, being in the public?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, this is a very personal story, but I'll share it. The way it happened was that, I used to be, more on the background, like nitty gritty, marketer on the background, crunching numbers. And at the same time, I experienced quite steep career path in terms of like growing in, to quite impactful roles. And it means that at some point I experienced the very well-known imposter syndrome, so widely discussed on LinkedIn as well. And I basically had a choice, so I could, digest it internally 100%, or at that point I found myself in the position that, okay, I can prove it by action that I can actually, that I can actually bring value. So that was my take on that. So basically I started posting on LinkedIn to share what I know and to get rid of all the thoughts in my head, and to fight this imposter syndrome that I was experiencing. And I was like very straightforward with myself. It was like, okay, Olga, let's see like whether you bring any value to the marketers world or not. And this is how it started. And it was basically, self-therapy tool. At the same time, it was like, knowledge assessment tool for me. And this is what drove me. So I didn't have, this brand building. Obviously, there was part of brand building, but for me, it was 100% secondary to the first self-therapy one. And after doing it for several months, I was like, oh, I actually enjoy it. So this is how I started doing it on a regular basis. So for me, it's more about the fun part rather than, the routine part that, okay, I have to post something to build my brand online. It's more about self-reflectory. It's more about, okay, listening to the, to other LinkedIn gurus and seeing what they have to say, what I have to say. And so this is how I envision things going. But let's see, probably in a year, I'll be like, no, I'm done. I'm going back to behind the scene.
It's very fascinating to me, and it seems paradoxical. If I didn't know anything about imposter syndrome, I would think that it was a paradox, because we just talked about how you'd implemented this very interesting attribution system, had done mass scale personalization, and you do all of these things in the field, like you're actually doing things, and you felt imposter syndrome having not talked about them. And like, if you look at the opposite, which I feel like I see quite often on LinkedIn, especially, is a lot of people talking about things without having done them. And it's almost like I wish there was a little more imposter syndrome in those people, right? Like the huge influx of artificial intelligence experts who I don't know what makes them artificial intelligence experts other than they have a list of 20 tools. But it's very interesting, because you would think that you, having been in the weeds, would not feel the imposter syndrome. But does that make sense?
I hear you. And well, I'll tell you this, and this is what I also just shared with one of my former colleagues. The tendency that I noticed is that the brightest minds, the best professionals I ever met, they all doubted themselves. And they criticized themselves like harshly. They were like the worst critics of what they do. And they also shared with me candidly that, okay, so probably I don't know what I'm doing, having like amazing track record and so many successes in the past. And this is also what partly helped me, again, also sharing more widely. I was like, okay, if these, again, best minds I ever met have this, so it means I'm probably in a good company. And another take on that is that it also means that you're very self-aware. And for me, it's like the must for self-development, right? Because it's so easy, to sit on laurels, like, okay, I've done this. I'm now a guru.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like the recipe for failure.
Yeah, like I said, if I didn't understand imposter syndrome, that would be a paradox for me. But all of that resonates, because if you're just looking at what you're doing on a daily basis and you've got that mind that says, I could do better, like all you're doing is seeing all the ways that you could improve and all of the things that you could be learning, and like all of the areas that you don't feel like a master of yet. And then you go and talk about it in the public and you realize, wow, even the things that seem the most banal and easy to me are actually interesting. So therefore, I'm almost getting I'm getting market validation that what I'm doing is expertise. Like I feel from others that what I'm doing, I actually am an expert. Whereas if it's just you in isolation, you don't necessarily feel that.
Yeah, exactly that.
Very interesting. Anyway, we're at time. I feel like we could do a whole separate episode on many of these topics: imposter syndrome, personalization, attribution. But mindful of your time, so thanks so much for doing the conversation. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, well, like we discussed on LinkedIn, I will be very open to new connections and open debate. And Alex, thank you very much for having me. And it was a very, very peculiar list of questions, and I loved it so much.
That is the highest compliment I can receive. So thank you.